Have you ever noticed how people turn against you the moment they realize they can't control you? When people can't control you, they'll start spreading lies instead. They liked you when you agreed, when you stayed quiet, when you played by their rules. But the second you stopped explaining yourself, the second you stood your ground, they didn't walk away. They rewrote the story. Not because you changed, but because you stopped letting them hold the pen. It's like riding a camel across the desert with someone who insists they know the way. You follow, you trust. But the moment you take the reins, they panic. Not because you're lost, but because they're no longer leading. And when they can't guide you, they'll guide others, away from you. Or think of an atomic bomb, silent while it's being built. But once it's ready, once its power can't be contained, the world around it changes. That's you. The moment you stop being manageable, they go nuclear, not to your face, but behind your back. Because while they're busy trying to control how others see you, you have a choice: defend your image or live your truth. And when you choose your peace over their approval, that's when their lies begin to look like desperation. That's when silence becomes your sharpest answer. So what do you do when someone starts spreading lies just because they can't control you anymore? Stay with me, because what you'll learn next might just set you free. Let's get started. Number 1. Control lost, narrative created. Let's talk about one of the most revealing behaviors people display when they realize they can't control you anymore. They start controlling the narrative. At first, they might have tried to influence you directly, through guilt, through pressure, through manipulation disguised as concern. But once you set boundaries, once you say no without flinching or begin living on your own terms, they lose their grip. And that's when the real game begins. Because when someone can no longer control your actions, they'll often shift to controlling how others perceive you. Here's the truth. When someone realizes they can no longer influence your choices, they often try to influence how others see you. It starts with subtle remarks behind your back. They twist stories, take things out of context, plant doubts in people's minds. Suddenly, people are treating you differently, and you can't figure out why until you realize someone's been rewriting your story. But not because it's true. They lie because they've lost something they never thought you'd take back: your autonomy. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them." Think about that. The opinions of others, even if influenced by lies, don't define your worth. What causes distress isn't the whispering or the betrayal, it's how much weight you give those whispers. And the moment you understand this, you reclaim something even more powerful than your reputation, your peace. Let me share a story. A woman I know, let's call her Jessica, used to be part of a close-knit group of friends. One person in that group, let's call her Amanda, had always held quiet control over everyone. She was the one people looked to for approval. The moment Jessica started setting boundaries, declining last-minute plans, speaking her mind more openly, Amanda felt that shift. She didn't confront Jessica directly. Instead, she started making comments like, "Jessica's really changed lately, haven't you noticed?" Or, "She's become so distant, I hope everything's okay at home." Harmless on the surface, but enough to raise eyebrows. Slowly, people began pulling away from Jessica, not because she had done anything wrong, but because someone else was carefully shaping a new version of her in their minds. But Jessica didn't crumble. She didn't beg for understanding or try to correct every rumor. Instead, she focused on living honestly and let her actions speak louder than the noise. And over time, the truth caught up. The people who mattered saw through the smokescreen, and Amanda, her need to control others, revealed more about her than it ever did about Jessica. So how do you deal with this? First, don't react emotionally to the lies. That's what they want. Second, stay rooted in your values. Your consistency will do more to dismantle false narratives than any defense you could make. And finally, understand that losing people who believe lies about you isn't really a loss. It's a clearing. At the end of the day, when someone can't control you, their last weapon is often distortion. But that only works on people who don't know you or don't want to. So let them talk, and while they do, keep rising. Number 2, lies are a reflection of their fear, not your truth. Let's talk about something that hurts deeply but reveals even more: when people lie about you. Not playful rumors, not harmless exaggerations. I'm talking about the deliberate kind. The kind meant to distort, to damage, to quietly chip away at how others see you. They'll whisper behind closed doors, twist your words, and paint a version of you that doesn't match your reality. But here's what most people miss. Their lies aren't about you at all. They're about themselves. Here's the truth. What they say about you in your absence is a confession of their own weakness. When someone feels threatened by your strength, your clarity, your independence, they can't fight it directly. So they use deception to feel in control again. They fabricate stories not because you're dangerous, but because your authenticity unsettles them. Your refusal to conform, to shrink, to be easily managed. That's what terrifies them. And instead of growing themselves, they try to drag you back down. But their lies? They say more about their insecurity than your identity. This is where Stoic insight becomes your armor. Epictetus said, "Blame is the weapon of the weak. Truth needs no defense." Read that again. A lie needs energy, repetition, and constant maintenance. But the truth? It stands quietly. It doesn't chase approval or scream to be believed. So when someone fabricates stories about you, remember, they're not exposing your flaws. They're exposing their fears. They're trying to destroy your name because your presence reminds them of everything they've failed to become. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Tyler, was promoted at his company after years of quiet dedication and behind-the-scenes excellence. No politics, no showboating, just consistent work. But after the promotion, a colleague who was passed over began spreading rumors. Nothing outright slanderous, just enough to cast shadows. Comments like, "Tyler's really good at playing the system," or "I heard he's close with upper management," if you know what I mean. At first, Tyler was crushed. He felt betrayed and misunderstood. He considered confronting the colleague, even defending himself to others. But then he paused. He remembered who he was. He hadn't manipulated anyone. He hadn't stepped on others to get ahead. His record was clean, his growth earned. And so he chose not to fight back. Instead, Tyler kept working. He stayed calm, focused, and consistent. Over time, people saw through the rumors. His integrity outlasted the lies. And the colleague who'd started it all? Their behavior became the real story. Their bitterness, their envy. It became visible without anyone needing to call it out. So how do you deal with lies like these? First, know that you don't have to chase every whisper. Second, remember that your truth doesn't require validation. And third, trust that over time, who you are will silence who they say you are. At the end of the day, lies are not your reflection. They're theirs. So let them reveal themselves. Let their stories unravel on their own. And while they do, walk on with truth as your shadow, because no one outruns truth for long. Number 3. Silence threatens the manipulator. Let's talk about something far more powerful than most people realize: your silence. Not the kind of silence that hides fear or guilt, but the silence born from clarity and control. The kind that doesn't chase, doesn't plead, doesn't defend. When someone who once thrived on manipulating you, emotionally, mentally, socially, suddenly finds you quiet, detached, and unbothered, it shakes them. Because people who crave control don't just want to be heard, they want a reaction. And when you deny them that reaction, their grip starts to crack. Here's the truth. Your refusal to react, to chase, or to beg, it enrages those who need control to feel significant. And that's exactly when the lies begin. Not because you did something wrong, but because they did, and now they're scrambling to reclaim the power they lost. They speak louder because you're no longer giving them your energy. They twist stories, not because they're confident, but because they're desperate. Lies become their last attempt to keep your attention. Because your silence, that's what terrifies them most. This is where Stoic wisdom gives you your anchor. Seneca said, "He who angers you conquers you. Stay still, and he has no power." Think about that. Your silence isn't weakness, it's dominance. It's the refusal to be baited, to be pulled back into chaos. When someone lies about you to provoke you, to get a rise out of you, and you don't flinch, that's when you win. Because they've exposed their need for attention, their dependency on conflict, and you've chosen peace over performance. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call her Rachel. She ended a long friendship with someone who had become increasingly toxic. This friend, let's call her Megan, didn't handle boundaries well. She thrived on constant access to Rachel, knowing where she was, who she was with, even influencing Rachel's decisions. But one day, Rachel stopped explaining herself. She began saying no without guilt and "I don't owe you that" without flinching. Megan didn't confront her directly. Instead, she started telling others, "Rachel just ghosted me," or "I guess she thinks she's better than everyone now." She painted Rachel as cold, ungrateful, even arrogant. But Rachel, she didn't respond. No posts, no explanations, no retaliation. She simply lived. And over time, Megan's narrative couldn't hold. People started to notice the pattern. Megan had done this before, twisted truths when she lost control. Rachel's silence didn't just protect her, it revealed everything that needed to be seen. So, how do you handle it? First, understand that silence is not passive, it's powerful. Second, recognize that manipulators thrive on emotional responses. Take that away, and they lose their footing. Third, live in such a way that your peace contradicts their lies. At the end of the day, your stillness is louder than their noise. When you stop feeding the fire, it burns itself out. So stay still, stay grounded, and let your silence speak the truth they can't stand to hear. If you've watched the video this far, don't forget to leave a comment with a "thank God" and give it a like if you enjoyed the content. Your support means a lot and motivates me to keep creating more interesting videos. I hope you find inspiration in them and that we continue learning together. Thank you for your support. Number 4, they want you to break your own character. Let's talk about one of the most subtle and most dangerous intentions behind people's lies. They don't just want to damage your image, they want to damage your integrity. When someone can't control you anymore, and their stories and slander don't seem to shake you on the outside, their next hope is that the pressure will get to you on the inside, that eventually you'll snap, that you'll lose composure, lash out, go low, and act in a way that contradicts who you really are. That's their win. Because if they can't ruin your reputation, maybe they can get you to ruin it yourself. Here's the truth. They hope the rumors will push you into defending yourself, reacting emotionally, or stooping to their level. Because the moment you start fighting back on their terms, you validate the drama. You legitimize their noise. And even worse, you chip away at the person you've worked so hard to become. That's what they're waiting for. Not just to see you hurt, but to see you behave out of alignment with your values, because that makes it easier for them to say, "See, I told you they weren't who they pretend to be." This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your compass. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." That might sound simplistic, but it's deeply profound. The harm isn't in the rumor. It's in how deeply you let it penetrate. The real damage isn't in what they say. It's in whether or not you let it make you bitter, reactive, or someone you're not. And the most powerful act of resistance is not retaliation, it's restraint. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call him Daniel. He worked in a small creative agency where a colleague began spreading lies out of jealousy, whispers that Daniel was dishonest in his billing, that he manipulated clients, that he took credit for others' ideas. None of it was true. Daniel was furious. He wanted to blast emails, set the record straight, even confront the guy in front of everyone. But something stopped him. Instead, he decided to focus on doing his job with even more clarity and consistency. He showed up early, delivered results, and treated everyone with the same respect he always had. He didn't play the game. And what happened? Over time, the colleagues' words began to fall apart. People saw the disconnect between the rumors and Daniel's daily conduct. No long explanations, no emotional responses, just steady character. And that contrast, that was the real exposure. So how do you handle this? First, remember your peace is your power. Don't trade it for a moment of emotional satisfaction. Second, ask yourself, will this reaction bring me closer to who I want to be? And third, let your character be your witness. Let your life speak for you. At the end of the day, they want you to break your own character. Don't give them that victory. There's nothing more disruptive to someone trying to bring you down than your refusal to descend. Hold the high ground. Not for pride, but for peace. Number 5. Isolation is their tactic. Let's talk about one of the most strategic yet often overlooked weapons used by people who feel threatened by your independence: isolation. When they can no longer control you directly and their words don't provoke you, they often resort to the next best thing, cutting you off from others. Not by confronting you, not by setting boundaries themselves, but by working behind the scenes to turn others against you. They don't want to just hurt you privately, they want to remove your support system. Because if they can make you feel alone, then maybe, just maybe, you'll come crawling back. Here's the truth. By painting you as wrong or unstable, they aim to isolate you socially. It's not just petty gossip, it's a calculated move. They'll disguise it as concern. They'll say things like, "I'm just worried about them," or "Have you noticed how different they've been?" But underneath the surface, the goal is clear: to plant seeds of doubt, to make others question your integrity, your stability, your worth. Because when people start pulling away from you, you begin to question yourself. And once self-doubt sets in, control becomes easier again. This is where Stoic insight becomes your anchor. Epictetus said, "Time reveals character. Truth never stays buried." Think about that. In the moment, it may feel like their version of you is winning. You may feel misunderstood, even invisible. But time is a force they can't manipulate. Consistency, honesty, and character, they speak louder than whispers ever will. And those who truly see you, they won't be fooled. They may be silent at first, watching from the sidelines, unsure of what's true. But over time, truth rises. It always does. Let me tell you a story. A woman I know, let's call her Sarah, went through this exact experience. After ending a toxic friendship with someone who constantly disrespected her boundaries, the aftermath was quiet, but vicious. The friend began telling mutual connections that Sarah was acting different, seemed unstable, and probably needed help. One by one, people stopped calling. She'd show up at gatherings and feel the shift in energy, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, conversations that ended when she approached. At first, it broke her. She felt alone, like she'd lost her entire circle. But instead of defending herself to everyone, she focused inward. She began rebuilding her life, meeting new people, doubling down on her passions, living with more intention than ever before. Months later, those same people began returning. One even said, "I don't know what happened between you two, but I've watched how you've carried yourself through all of this. And it says everything." Sarah hadn't lost herself. She had just lost those too easily swayed by fiction. So how do you handle this? First, don't panic when the circle shrinks. It's revealing who's real. Second, trust that your life, when lived authentically, will do the speaking for you. And third, never let the strategy of isolation convince you you're alone. At the end of the day, isolation is their tactic, but truth is your weapon. And while they may work in the shadows, your light will make their strategy irrelevant. Keep showing up, keep standing tall, because those who truly see you won't need anyone else's version of the story. If you found this valuable, hit like and subscribe for more powerful insights. Number 6, they can't accept your independence. Let's talk about one of the most uncomfortable truths for people who once had influence over you. Your independence doesn't just surprise them, it offends them. The moment you start making decisions without their input, when your happiness no longer includes their validation, and when your peace no longer depends on their presence, that's when their ego takes a hit. And instead of confronting their own discomfort, they often turn to something easier. They try to rewrite your story with lies, because if they can't be a part of your growth, they'll attempt to discredit it. Here's the truth: your peace without them, your growth beyond them, it offends their ego. Maybe you were once the person who asked for their advice constantly. Maybe you leaned on them in tough times, shared your doubts, sought their reassurance. But now you've learned to carry your own weight. You trust your judgment. You move quietly, confidently, and that unsettles them. Not because you've done something wrong, but because they can't stand being irrelevant in your new chapter. And so, the lies begin. Small ones at first, but they grow. Because every step forward you take without them feels like a step away from their influence. This is where Stoic wisdom brings clarity. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Your independence, your emotional self-sufficiency is a freedom they never expected you to claim. And when you stop needing them, they lose the only leverage they had. But here's what's powerful: their opinion, their approval, their narrative, that's all beyond your control. And it doesn't need to be part of your freedom. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Eric, was in a long friendship with someone who subtly controlled his decisions. Whenever Eric thought about switching jobs, moving cities, or starting something new, his friend always had a reason to discourage it. At first, Eric mistook it for concern, but over time, he realized that his friend only felt secure when Eric was uncertain. The moment Eric finally accepted a new job in another state, a job he'd dreamed about for years, that friend didn't celebrate. Instead, he told others, "Eric's making a mistake. He's running from his problems." The message was clear. If Eric wasn't close and dependent, he must be lost or unstable. But Eric knew better. He moved, started fresh, and never looked back. And over time, the friend's lies began to lose their sting. People saw the change in Eric, his growth, his calm, his sense of purpose, and the one left clinging to the past. He stayed exactly where he'd always been, trapped in a story where control mattered more than connection. So how do you handle this? First, honor your growth. Don't let guilt invite you back into old roles. Second, recognize that ego is often louder than truth, especially when someone feels left behind. And third, stay free, not just in actions, but in mind. At the end of the day, they can't accept your independence because it proves they were never necessary. Let them wrestle with that. You just keep building a life that doesn't require permission to thrive. Number 7, let their lies be their legacy, not yours. Let's talk about one of the hardest lessons to accept, especially when you know you've been lied about. Not every rumor deserves a reaction. When someone twists your words, questions your character, or paints a false version of you, it's natural to want to fight back, to clear your name, to show people the truth. But here's what the Stoics understood, and what many of us forget. Reacting to every whisper is a trap, because the moment you start chasing down every false version of yourself, you stop living as the real one. And in trying to correct their story, you can accidentally become part of it. Here's the truth. You don't need to correct every whisper. Some people lie because it's the only way they can feel powerful. Some lie because they're hurting. Others lie simply because they think no one will check them. But the common thread, they want a reaction. They want to pull you into their drama. And when you refuse, that's when their story begins to unravel, because lies need fuel, attention, emotion, outrage, but when you give them nothing, they burn out on their own. This is where Stoic wisdom holds its power. Seneca said, "Don't waste time defending yourself against lies. Time and conduct are the best witnesses." Think about that. You don't have to shout your truth. You just have to live it consistently, because over time, your actions will reveal who you really are, and their lies will become obvious for what they always were. Projections, insecurities, distractions. The people who matter, the ones with discernment, they'll see the difference. And those who don't, they were never yours to convince. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call her Monica. She left a job after months of mistreatment and manipulation. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't blast anyone on her way out. But after she left, the rumors started. Her old boss said she was unreliable, unprofessional, and even emotionally unstable. At first, it devastated her. She wanted to write emails, post receipts, defend every decision she'd made. But she didn't. Instead, she focused on rebuilding her peace. She got a new job, one that valued her. She kept showing up, showing excellence, staying silent. A year later, someone from that old workplace reached out and said, "I just wanted you to know, I didn't believe what they said. Watching how you've carried yourself since, it told me everything I needed to know." Monica never defended herself, but her life did. So how do you handle this? First, resist the urge to perform your innocence. You're not here to prove anything to anyone. Second, live so consistently that the truth becomes unmissable. And third, let time carry your character where explanations never could. At the end of the day, let their lies be their legacy, not yours. You've got more important things to build than your defense. Let them stay stuck in stories. You move forward in truth. That's the loudest response of all. If you believe this video can help others, give it a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm show it to more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content coming your way. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will definitely reply.